I'm Diane Dyson, and I'm actually just going to be doing sort of the first couple of the introductory slides, and I do want to thank John Shields and Ryerson for providing the labors of a great research assistant to help us with some of our work. So this will be Keren's work we'll look at more closely today.
Okay, great, thanks Diane.
Yeah.
Well, this podium probably wasn't designed for 2 laptops, but this is like the next generation, right? Who prints their notes?
I do.
Everyone but me, okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much to the Center for Labor Management Relations for having us today. And thank you, John and Diane, for bringing me onto this wonderful project to serve as a research assistant. Today we're going to share some findings about an empirical study that explores the experiences of newcomers from the Bangladeshi, the Chinese and the Somali communities, particular enclaves in East Toronto. We're going to tell this story through a picture of the numbers, tell you a bit about the struggle to survive and also perseverance and resiliency. My name is Keren Gottfried. I'm a graduate student here at Ryerson's Public Policy Program, and I'm deeply grateful to work with this community academic partnership. Our team includes Diane Dyson here from WoodGreen Community Services, and also Haweya Ege, who's sitting there at the back, who's been working very hard on this project from the Toronto South Local Immigration Partnership, and her colleague Sandra Guerra, who is not here but who has also been working quite hard, and John Shields, the lead investigator from Ryerson. So today what we'll do is give you a bit of a picture of this research project and the impact that we hope it'll have with this empirical evidence. We'll tell you how it came to be, a bit of the background of the project, the driving research questions, and some of our main findings. So now I'll turn it over to Diane to take it away. Great.
So for those of you who might not know the immigration sector, there were established about 6 years ago these ideas of local immigration partnerships, which is the idea that community agencies and others who work with newcomers in community should get together and begin to coordinate our activities. It was sort of one of those big picture ideas that came forward from the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. So there are, in Toronto, 4-quadrant area local immigration partnerships. When they first emerged, though, they were a much smaller size and they were neighborhood-based. So the east end of the old city of Toronto was the former Toronto East Neighborhood LIP, or as somebody recently taught me, the LIP service. So we had a number of tables, and if you're dealing with immigrant issues, one of the first things that people are going to arrive through your doors and ask for is to say employment, jobs, let's talk about that. And so we had a small working group, Bangladeshi Canadian Community Services, Canadian Chinese National Council of Toronto, and a few others that were saying, let's focus in on this area. We came up with an idea and were able to turn to Wellesley. Sheila Block was instrumental in some of that, along with Barbara Roche, and got a small amount of funding so that we could hire a squadron of community researchers in a very precarious manner. So I just want to make that nod, and it was an exchange of labor in terms of we gave them at least a minimum wage, but they brought a strong intellectual capital to that. And my colleague Nasima Akhtar, who's not here today but is head of the Bangladeshi Canadian Community Services, was the lead and number cruncher around this. So what we were able to do, and it's really partly my bent that when I look at a problem I need to know the scope of it, we were able to get out into 3 specific ethnic enclaves within the East End and speak to them about how they were managing, how were they coping, because we knew that wages were not very high, we knew that there was, they were not getting into good jobs, so what was the strategies they were using. So we randomized the interviews and were able to talk to 453 households about their family budgets, essentially. And that resulted in a report that's posted at the Wellesley website and the WoodGreen website called Shadow Economies. However, the data that we collected was so rich, we knew that there was much more to uncover. And so I was really pleased when we were able to form a partnership and get an RBC grant so that we could then say, let's look at this data a little bit further. And that's what led to today. So Haweya and Sandra have been key supports on that area. And we wanted to uncover more. But what we were able to do essentially in the first report was a lot of the descriptive reports, descriptive statistics, and so we wanted to go in and look at a few more of the crosstabs of what was going on. So I'm going to just give you a couple more slides, and then Keren will step in. So our initial research question was, how do immigrants survive this poor labor market access, and what are the work conditions and what are they doing? We went in with an asset-based model where people that hear survival stories all the time. We're tired of the awfulizing that so often happens around these issues. So we thought we're going to go, these will be survival stories, will be discussions of resilience. What we found though was a bit sadder though. And sadder, I'm saying that in the context of somebody who, in our sector, we work with newcomers all the time, but even some of these results did shock us. So we did know that the overall, that newcomers often find themselves shut out of those formal sustainable jobs. And one of the stats that I had to rerun and double check was looking at, of the 185 people who had been in a professional job before they immigrated, that is banks, accounting, professors, teachers, things like that, of the 185, only 4 of them actually had a professional job here. That works out to about 3%. Now, we were talking to immigrants that are living in enclaves. It would be perhaps once you've got a professional job, you may be more willing to move out into other areas of the city. So that that would be one of the limitations of that. But what we did find is that people are coping by layering their income sources, whether that was doing small startup businesses, some bartering, or doing casual jobs for others. You always hear the stories of the people that run small restaurants out of their apartment buildings and things. An awful lot of working off the books, under the books, people saying, if an inspector shows up, I just say I'm a friend of the owner. I don't say I'm an employee. So no, really not a road to success. In fact, what we found was deep poverty among the households that we talked to. 63% of them were earning less than $30,000. Don't forget the average household income is much closer to 50 here. And that 46% of the households earned at least some income off the books. It is also there about the number of employment. And this is the part when you're looking at what were the kinds of jobs that people were doing. 41% of the people we spoke to that were earning some sort of income working for others were in a job that didn't even meet basic provincial employment standards. That is, they were not being paid minimum wage, they were not being given their 2-week standard vacation or the 4% pay, that there was something that we have set out as a province that everyone should have, that most of the immigrants that we spoke to, and these are not people that are undocumented, these are people that came through the route, these are people who have been here 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, were facing horrible jobs. We had a range of 10 different dimensions of what was a good job or not. So some of those were sublegal, substandard jobs, and some of those were just noise and dust and things like that. So when we broadened that definition of what was a bad job, 70% of them were working with at least one poor working condition. Yeah, shocking. And don't even get me started on the bullying and things like that happened to them. And finally, I'm just going to mention around the what's that one? 80%. I'm not sure what the 31% is. Sorry, we did this back in 2012. Look the study up if you like. And we also were able to measure around several different health dimensions about sleepiness and anxiety levels and things like that. Again, we found that very high. So I'm going to turn it now to Keren.
Great, thanks Diane. One of the really unique aspects of this project was that it doesn't try to talk about immigrants in Toronto as one aggregated group, because I think we know from an intersectional analysis point of view that it just doesn't make sense to group such a diverse group into one pot. So this project, which really looked at these 3 specific communities, can also be broken down by gender, and that was a dimension that we were able to scratch the surface in the Shadow Economies report, and that now we're trying to dig deeper. So what we've done in this round is we've done a little bit of statistical modeling just to find out where are the significant differences, what really are the differences here. And the numbers that I've put up here are aggregate, but what we're also doing I can tell you that our analysis has begun to start to disaggregate this. In the sample, we had about 200 folks from the Chinese community and 200 folks from the Bangladeshi community. There were 40 from the Somali, so it's a bit too small for the gendered analysis within that group. But I can tell you that these distinctions I'm going to go through actually reflect both communities. Some of them are stronger in some than in others. So for example, when we look at the difference in English, and we know from the original analysis that that's a very significant indicator of whether or not you're going to be able to get work at all, and the volume of work and the quality of that work. So we looked, about 1 in 2 men in the sample had the highest level of English, and only 30% of women did. Now, moreover, in terms of attitudes, and also in terms of health outcomes, women were bearing really the worst aspects of these situations. So this was a household study, meaning that the household incomes across all of the participants are going to be the same. However, when you ask women, they're considerably more likely to say that their households are having difficulties making ends meet. And they're also twice as likely to say that in terms of how they're dealing with that situation, they're taking some of the personal cuts to the family budget, whereas only 1 in 10 men say that they're doing that. Interestingly, when we asked who's participating in the informal economy, and we define that as any form of self-employed work, so any type of entrepreneurial work, or cash economy work, and we aggregated those. The levels were actually the same statistically between men and women, but the quality and the type of that work was quite different. So women are more likely to take on roles as caretakers, so babysitters or caregivers for the elderly, to work in food service or to do sewing, and men are more likely to participate in building repair, also construction, and service drivers. And women tell us that, it's not listed here, but they're more likely to do this because of convenience. So we know from the qualitative data in the first report that women say, to be able to stay at home and to raise my family while simultaneously working a self-employed job is just the convenient way that I can supplement the household income, whereas men are more likely to say it's just because they just can't get enough funds from their other jobs. Women are also more likely to say they're dissatisfied with their current jobs, and they're more likely to say, linking back to that first point, that it's due to their English levels. They're also considerably more likely to rate their own health as fair or poor, and that rating extends over to issues of stress, loss of sleep, and presence of depression. So in the interest of time, I'll jump to our just final slide here. What we're finding both from the initial analysis that the team did in the Shadow Economies report, and now as we're digging deeper with some modeling, we see both vulnerabilities and we see both opportunities for resiliency. So these are people who are dealing with very tight constraints and who are trying their best and struggling, and also managing to find very creative ways to deal with the barriers that they're facing. We did note, so this was in the ethnicity slide, the picture is very different between the Bangladeshi community and the Chinese community. They're facing different barriers, and we see that the types of informal work that these two groups are doing is quite different. If people have questions about it, maybe we could talk about it during the Q&A. And now the next step in our research project is to do some more statistical modeling. So we've shown you examples of significant variances between men and women on aggregate, and we also have them within the ethnic groups. But the question is, what's driving these differences? And that's the next step in our research. So thank you very much, and appreciate your time today.